Nice to have Cindy back, isn't it? Today, I want to explore the joke that you've probably heard before. Buddhist goes to a hot dog stands on the 4th of July and he says, "Make me one with everything." And the guy says, "That'll be $2." And he hands him a 5. And he says, and the guy doesn't give him any change back. And he says, "Hey, where's my change?" And the vendor says, "Change must come from within." Well, all right, so let's talk about, today I want to talk about a few things kind of jumbled together, but largely what we're going to be talking about is this underlying basis of the nature of reality that people of a certain ilk can sense. And that basis is really the foundation of who we are as a community, and hopefully will be the basis of our sanity to some degree. So let me start by talking about George Washington Carver. Some of you know that name. George Washington Carver was born a slave just toward the end of slavery, and his parents were stripped from him early by a kidnapper. They were never returned. He grew up with the white family that he had been a slave to, or his parents had been a slave to. Went on to educate himself in progressively far afield, learning more and more and more. But what was the central thing I'd like to talk about today was that he became the great scientist that he was, in large part because he sat in the forest every morning at 4 a.m. Now, George Washington Carver was essentially a chemist. He was a professor at Tuskegee, and he came up with many ways to use the sweet potato, the peanut, soybeans, pecans. All of these he came up with because he was trying to find products that were the surplus of the farming technique that he was advocating, which was rotation of crops. In the South, they had been growing cotton for a long time, and cotton is a depleting plant. It takes nitrogen out of the soil. And so the soil was becoming less and less productive, and many of the now freed African Americans were living on poor cropland, and his desire was to improve the quality of their life by improving how much cash they could earn as farmers. His way of doing this was to get them to rotate their crops from cotton one year to legumes the next, mostly peanuts, sometimes these other crops. And what happened was, when that happened, then there were too many peanuts. So he had to come up with uses for peanuts. He came up with 300 uses for peanuts. Though he didn't really invent peanut butter, that's one of the things they attribute to him, was he's the father of peanut butter. So George Washington Carver made a huge impact on this country, but largely his inspiration came not only from being a scientist, but by being intuitive, by listening to nature. So let me just read a couple of quotes from George Washington Carver. So, well, this ought to tickle you. "My prayers seem to be more an attitude than anything else. I indulge in very little lip service. But I ask the great Creator silently daily, and often many times during the day, to permit me to speak to him through the 3 great kingdoms of the world, which he has created, that is, the animal, the mineral, and the vegetable kingdoms. Their relationships to each other, our relationships to them, and the great God who made all of us. I ask him daily and often momentarily to give me wisdom, understanding, and bodily strength to do his will. Hence, I am asking and receiving all the time." There's one more phrase, I don't seem to be able to have it right in front of me, but it said, you can learn anyone's secrets, if you love them enough. So he used to say he talked to the flowers, and in the flowers would reveal their secrets. This is mysticism. This is finding the presence, the wisdom that is everywhere. He called nature the great broadcaster of God's wisdom, that it was speaking to him, probably literally, in a certain sense. He probably heard words. He certainly was inspired. And out of that came these crops, and therefore the plight of many people was improved. So he's a practical example of tuning in to the deeper nature of things by being still and listening and hearing inside of all existence what we might call the universe, hearing what the universe has to say to us. Now, this idea of knowing what to do by being at depth with the nature of reality as itself is an old philosophy. And it was codified early on in about 2,600 years ago in China. So at the time in China, something was happening that doesn't seem that distant to us today. There were warlords, and there were fractions in the country. And the country was trying to figure out, well, how to live together. There was no emperor at the time that had control over China. It was too many broken up states, and so they were often fighting each other. Two philosophies arose in China about that time. One of them was Confucianism, the other one was Taoism. Now their sources, I don't want to go too much into the past, but let's just say that around that time they arose. Confucianism said, we live in a society, and from society we should learn the lessons that we need to be a civil society. So Confucianism said, let's be civil, essentially. Let's do the rituals, let's perform in a sophisticated, civilized manner, follow the rules, let's honor our father and mother and the leaders, and let the leaders be kind and benevolent to those beneath them, and the parents be kind to their children. And this structure of ordering society essentially didn't take hold in China because there was too much tension, too many wars, too much going on. But now once the emperor came in and took control of the whole country, this became the advised idea. It became a very popular idea that order and structure was very helpful, honoring your superiors and then them being benevolent upon you was the way of a good society, and that became Confucianism. There was a somewhat different approach called Taoism. That's Tao, T-A-O, Taoism. Essentially, the text for that is the Tao Te Ching, which was written by Lao Tzu or someone who compiled things and said they were written by Lao Tzu. I'm not really sure. But essentially, Lao Tzu was the author of the Tao Te Ching, and he took a different approach. In this approach, it was tune into the underlying nature, more or less like George Washington Carver, tune into the underlying nature of things, to this chaotic energy that has produced all that is, and see the beauty of the harmony that's created through that, flow with that, and everything you do will be natural and productive and good. So it's a bit different. It's still looking for peace and harmony in society, but it's saying the way to find it is not by following the rules, but by following the Tao. Now, the most famous phrase of the Tao Te Ching are the first ones, which basically say, the Tao that can be named is not the Tao. So everything I say, you can just about discount right from the very top. Let's see if I can read how Stephen Mitchell translates this. If you're looking for a translation of the Tao Te Ching, and there are many, this might be a good one to pick up. The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. The unnameable is the eternally real. Naming is the origin of particular things. Free from desire, you realize the mystery. Caught in desire, you see only manifestations. Isn't that the way it is? How many of us have been on the spiritual path trying to grab something, and all we get is substitutes for the real thing we want, right? That's essentially what this is saying. Stop your grasping, open, and see what happens. And the Tao that you find is the nature of things. It is not a deity up there. It is emerging and is everything, and into that everything resides. And it is not like a separate thing. It is the Tao. You can't name it because it's so everywhere present. You can't see it because it infuses everything that is. It takes up no space, but it fills everything. This is the Tao. This is the presence. And for many of us who sit in this room, we have had moments when we were sitting in meditation or in stillness or just being out in nature, and that sinking in happens and we just go, there's silence, there's presence, there's the divine, there's however you want to say it. The way Lao Tzu said it is, that's the Tao. And one of the things about Taoism is it says humility is a great thing. Be like water. Don't be like a hard person. Be like a soft person. Yield. Make space. Don't command others. Allow things to unfold. Trust, essentially, that all this is working. Now, in the fellowship hall, probably before the hour is over after church, you're going to hear someone say the phrase, that's just in divine order, right? That's the Tao. It's happening by itself. And when you bump up against something that doesn't appear to be right, yield. Don't fight it. Understand it. Make space for that. As the Tao would say, before something can be hard, it must be soft. Before something can be given, you must open to it. Before that which was left can be left, it must have been right. Just relax. It's changing. And the most common symbol of the Tao Te Ching is this circle with two paisley-looking things in it, one dark, one light. But the dark one has a hole of light in it, and the vice versa. And it's to be seen as something moving. So if you put that on a spinning device and it spun like that, that would be the nature of things. One becomes the next. Yet inside, even as it becomes something it wasn't, there's the remnant of what it was and the beginning of what it will be, and so on and so forth. Things unfold. Relax. Be at one with the nature of things. This is the Tao. Now, in the West, we have not tended to be very Taoist. We have tended to be theist. In the West, we have God the Father, right, the One, the man with a big beard and a bad attitude. That has been our God. And it has caused us to structure society along those lines, along theist lines. So you have the divine right of kings. The divine right of kings means that the king's right to be king came from God, the Big Daddy, appointed the little Big Daddy, who appointed the dukes and the barons and the counts and the chunk. Taoism, on the other hand, because it doesn't have a singular identity at the top, has a more democratized way of seeing society. That essentially society will organize itself in a helpful way if we will stop trying to govern it. One of the great things it says is if you want people to be good, don't have religion. Right? Don't try to make them good and they become good. Don't set up a thing of opposites, they'll just find it on their own. It's an interesting philosophy. It's not necessarily the way much of society today is structured, but it is an interesting philosophy. And one of the things that I think people feel when they come into this church is that there is a different underlying philosophy here, that essentially God is not angry at you. You do not have to make amends to that divine being. Your job is to know and to be who you should be in accordance with your higher nature, not your selfishness, not your neediness, or your anger, your aggression, but with this humility, this power, this presence which you share with everyone. And that as we move into that, we move into divine order, and we allow, surely we give our effort, but we do our effort and we release the outcome, at least to some degree. It isn't about us, this was about the doing. And we say things like, the universe is in charge. We have totally stripped out, when you say the universe is in charge, you've stripped out that theist philosophy completely, and you're back to Taoism. The universe is in charge. All that is all that is, and it's all in charge. Now, we were not the first to come up with that. So Spinoza might be the best example of this. So around 1700s, a guy named Spinoza, Baruch Spinoza, a Jew in Europe, wrote about what we now call pantheism. Pantheism, that God is in everything and is everything, and all things are God. And pantheism basically said the same thing. If you want to democratize a religion, you would call it, at the most extreme, you'd call it pantheistic. Or as we sang today, the God in me salutes the God in you. The presence of the divine that is in me is also in you. And if I look for you, or as George Washington Carver says, if I loved you enough, I would see it. We are looking for that experience, I think, where we don't see God as some distant authoritarian aspect, but something else, something that is present, that loves, that supports, that holds, that creates, that becomes, and then into that we reside back. Pantheist is an anathema to some religions. If you said, hey, yeah, I'm a pantheist, you go like, get out. Especially if they have a high structure, highly structured religions like theist religions. That's why unity is often not called an organized religion, but a disorganized religion. We don't have the makeup to be good at it, to be good at organization. We're just not like, and so the favorite way of describing a minister, he's a cat herder. You ever herded cats? And the best way to herd them is not to herd them. The best way to organize a church like this is not to organize a church too much. It organizes itself. And that's been my philosophy, whether I knew it or not, all along. It's like, if it doesn't want to happen, it doesn't happen. I can't make it happen. You know? You're not going to do what I tell you anyway, so why should I try? It's not my job. My job is to do whatever is my to do, but that's it. Not make you. So it works for me. Anyway, it works for me. I mean, I don't see any reason to try and tell adults what to do with their lives. Do you? My mother did. I mean, I know the other side. Age. I was 61 years old. She was telling me what to wear. That's not Taoism, I can tell you. It's not. So Spinoza comes along, and a lot of people have followed him. And I'd just like to read you an illustrious group of people who follow this idea of Taoism, or panentheism, or pantheism. So it's a long and good list. It will start with Albert Einstein, Emerson, Carl Jung, Alan Watts, Emily Dickinson, Nikola Tesla, Friedrich Nietzsche, W.E. Du Bois, Henry Thoreau, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, Rumi, Adi Shankara, and Lao Tzu. They all held this as the central thing. And Einstein was not even halvesies about it. He was ferociously in favor of this. That we don't see a big guy in the sky making it, but that it emerges, and our job was to understand nature deeply enough that we could see the mysteries of it, or as Carver said, love it enough that we could experience it as our truth, as who we are. So another way of thinking about this might be that essentially this eye disease that we have. Do you know, you ever heard that phrase? I didn't like her eyes were too close together. I did this, and then I did that, and then I did that. Her. This eye disease, I think, has come about as an evolutionary step which is not completed yet. And so the previous step looks enticing, to be simple as animals. We're not going to be able to pull that off. But we can also turn our attention back to this prior state. So I think what happened was that we have like all living creatures, we have this desire to survive. And that got coupled with the ability to make tools and to make improvements in life. And we thought, a little is good, a lot's got to be better. I tried that with aspirin as a 5-year-old. I thought, take one when you're sick. If you want to get better, then why not take the whole bottle and never get sick? It didn't work, right? I got pretty sick, went to the hospital, the whole thing. That's where we are. If a little is good, of I separateness, that's true. That's an evolutionary step. But too much, and we get in trouble. Too much, and we get sick. So this idea really is that we come back to knowing the right balance of I and we, and don't get too extreme on either one that we can't function. And this becomes the pathway toward harmony in society. So, many of you are troubled by much of what's happening in the world today. This might be a way of seeing it. To see the world as on a swinging experience. To yield where you can't fix. To open and to do where you can. To take no credit for success. To be humble in the process. To love the world and each other enough that you can see the truth of who you're talking to and the nature of reality. To be humble, not proud. To give without asking in return. This is a path. This is a path that I think many of you are already on. It is the nature of the Tao to be generous, So once you follow the path, then you can lighten up. All is well. Let us pray. Is that one hand clapping? Can I tell you something before Cindy gets going too far? I once did a talk my first year out of seminary about, and I had to come up with the answer to what is one hand clapping. Because I said it, the meaning of one hand clapping, and then I go, oh, I didn't say that, did I? Yes. So it dawned on me in that moment, the sound of one hand clapping is all sound. It's the one hand, the Tao clapping. That's what it is. So what is the sound of one hand clapping? It's everything. It's the horn, it's my voice, it's the piano, it's your breathing, it's everything you hear. That is the sound of one hand clapping. Let us pray. Deeper, let's go deeper. Come into the silence of your own being. A good way to start is to follow the breath, because the breath doesn't say much. And quiet behind it. Follow the breath. Feel its sensations. This is the Tao. First it is the in-breath. In the fullness of time, it becomes the out-breath. Yin becomes yang. Yang becomes yin. Go deeper into the silence. It helps to have your heart open. It helps to love. When we come out and become active in the world, see if we can maintain some contact with this place. This is your base. When we find our base, we are serene. Let us hold without straining onto the base as we awaken into this world. And so it is. Amen. So, you may be wondering what this is. We have a piano. It's been a good piano.